This is Mac OS Ken.
Apple announces DMA changes. The CEO of Epic hates them. And in-app game stores get the global go-ahead. Also, it is this show's birthday. It's Friday, the 26th of January, 2024. I'm Ken Ray, and this is news from macOS Ken, brought to you by yours truly and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Critics in the EU who still have questions for Apple on upcoming changes tied to the Digital Markets Act, or DMA, got answers on Thursday. They may not like them, but they got them nonetheless. The Cupertino company issued a press release yesterday announcing changes to iOS, Safari, and the App Store, impacting developers' apps in the European Union to comply with the DMA. According to Apple, the changes include more than 600 new APIs, expanded app analytics, functionality for alternative browser engines, and options for processing app payments and distributing iOS apps. It is important to remember, though, employing any of these may summon demons. Looking at some of the changes developers and the business people around them might like, there are new options for using payment service providers within a developer's app to process payments for digital goods and services. There are new options for processing payments via link out, where users can complete a transaction for digital goods and services on the developer's external website. Developers can also inform EU users of promotions, discounts, and other deals available outside of their apps. And there are business planning tools for developers to estimate fees and understand metrics associated with Apple's new business terms for apps in the EU, because there are new business terms for apps in the EU. Now, the very first thing Apple says about these is, only if you want to, but more technical sounding. Developers can choose to adopt these new business terms or stay on Apple's existing terms, according to the company. If they want to do the third-party payment thing or the sideloading thing or any of the new stuff, they need to agree to the new terms. Those new terms include reduced commission. A piece from Engadget says that basically works like the 3015 subscription commission that had been in place and stays in place outside the EU. Under the new structure for the EU, the piece says developers will pay 17% on subscriptions and in-app purchases, with the fee reducing to 10% for most developers after the first year. Under payment processing fee, Apple says iOS apps on the App Store can use the App Store's payment processing for an additional 3% fee. Developers can use a payment service provider within their app or link users to their website to process payments for no additional fee to Apple. However, there is also a new core technology fee. According to this section, iOS apps distributed from the App Store and/or an alternative app marketplace will pay €0.50 for each first annual install per year over a 1 million threshold. And/or look really important there. The Engadget piece I mentioned a moment ago says a new core technology fee will charge a flat €0.50 fee for all app downloads, regardless of whether they come from the App Store or a third-party website, after the first 1 million installs. To me, though, it sounds like that's only true for apps available any place besides or in addition to Apple's App Store. First, there's the and/or phraseology mentioned a moment ago. Additionally, in its segment about new business terms, Apple says developers in the EU can choose to adopt these new business terms or stay on Apple's existing terms. Fingers crossed for clarification on that one. Whatever the case, Apple says it will not apply to most developers. According to the company, 99% of developers would reduce or maintain the fees they owe to Apple, while less than 1% of developers would pay a core technology fee on their EU applications. Now, Apple has said for years that its chief complaint about these changes is tied to the safety and security of its users. The company is still looking to protect those, it seems. While developers will be able to employ sideloading or third-party app stores for app distribution, there are what Apple calls safeguards coming with iOS 17.4. They include notarization for iOS apps, a baseline review that applies to all apps regardless of their distribution channel, focused on platform integrity and protecting users. There are app installation sheets. That's info from the app notarization giving potential installers at-a-glance descriptions of what an app is and what it does before that app is downloaded. Authorization for marketplace developers. That's meant to ensure that third-party App Store developers commit to ongoing requirements that help protect users and developers, and additional malware protections that prevent iOS apps from launching if they're found to contain malware after being installed on a user's device. Apple says these help reduce some of the privacy and security risks to iOS users in the EU. It is worth remembering, though, operating outside the App Store may bring a pox upon your house. If folks like Facebook thought sideloading and other app stores meant an end to app tracking transparency, they need to think again. That will keep working, even with apps distributed outside of the App Store, according to the company. Some things will not keep working, though, like family purchase sharing and ask to buy, so operating outside the App Store could lead to your family's financial ruin. While Apple has promised more info for EU consumers in the coming days, there were some changes announced Thursday that will affect the buying public. Apps in the EU will include App Store product page labels that inform users when the app they're downloading uses alternative payment processing, in-app disclosure sheets that let users know when they're paying a processor besides Apple and when a developer is sending them to pay a third-party processor, new app review processes to verify that developers accurately communicate information about transactions that use alternative payment processors, and expanded data portability on Apple's data and privacy site, where EU users can retrieve new data about their usage of the App Store and export it to an authorized third party. Of course, paying in the App Store isn't the only way people pay with iPhone these days. They also use Apple Pay. And soon, users in the EU will be able to use other contactless payment options through their iPhone in a similar way. As had been announced by the European Commission, Apple says it is introducing APIs that'll let developers use iPhone's NFC technology in banking and wallet apps throughout the European Economic Area. Additionally, the company says changes on the way will let users in the EU select a third-party contactless payment app or an alternative app marketplace as their default. One more fairly big change for consumers: when iOS 17.4 hits, Safari will not be the only browser in town. The company says it's introducing a new choice screen that will surface when users first open Safari in iOS 17.4 or later. That screen will prompt EU users to choose a default browser from a list of options. Now, I said something earlier about using some of the new tools required by the DMA, summoning demons and bringing a pox upon your house or something. Yeah, Apple is sticking hard to its "we keep you safe, we know what's best" thing. In passages that practically come with a skull and crossbones next to them, Apple says things like, the new options for processing payments and downloading apps on iOS
open new avenues for malware, fraud and scams, illicit and harmful content, and other privacy and security threats.
And
Apple has less ability to address other risks, including apps that contain scams, fraud, and abuse, or that expose users to illicit, objectionable, or harmful content. In addition, apps that use alternative browser engines other than Apple's WebKit may negatively affect user experience, including impacts to system performance and battery life.
you can almost feel the communicable diseases you're going to get. If you're one to agree with Apple, you might see these as friendly, though perhaps heavy-handed warnings. If you're one to disagree with Apple, they may sound like scare tactics. Or you might hear both. How big a deal is this news for Apple's bottom line? Not big, according to analysts at JP Morgan. Apple Insider peeped a note on the question from that firm's peeps. The piece has the analysts arguing that the €0.50 fee Apple will charge will balance out the reduced commissions, and besides, Europe only accounts for about 6% of App Store revenue. Yeah, sure, but 6% here, 6% there. Pretty soon you're talking about 12 to 18%. And that could actually be a bigger issue. Quoting Apple Insider, changes to the App Store market in the EU are restricted to that region. However, regulators around the world may seek to achieve similar results. The US, for example, is already said to be firing on all cylinders in an antitrust investigation on Apple's App Store. Now, upset with all of this is Tim Sweeney, CEO of Epic. VentureBeat had the Fortnite fighter going ballistic after Apple's DMA-related announcements. Quoting his screed, Apple's plan to thwart Europe's new Digital Markets Act law is a devious new instance of malicious compliance. They are forcing developers to choose between App Store exclusivity and the store terms, which will be illegal under DMA, or accept a new, also illegal anti-competitive scheme, rife with new junk fees on downloads and new Apple taxes on payments they don't process. But wait, there's more. The part in Apple's info about authorization for marketplace developers. Yes, Sweeney says with that clause, Apple could block Epic from launching the Epic Game Store and distributing Fortnite through it, for example, or block Microsoft, Valve, Good Old Games, or new entrants. Had enough? Too bad. Sweeney went on to say, Epic has always supported the notion of Apple notarization and malware scanning for apps, but we strongly reject Apple's twisting this process to undermine competition and continue imposing Apple taxes on transactions they're not involved in. But he's planning to head back to iPhone anyway. A piece from TechCrunch says, in light of the changes Apple announced, Epic plans to bring Fortnite back to iOS this year. The plan to offer Fortnite for iOS dovetails with Epic's news that it will launch a version of the Epic Games Store on the platform in the EU. Likely to be a bit less controversial are the changes Apple announced for streaming game services and apps that provide access to mini-apps and games. In that press release, Apple announced new options for how apps globally can deliver in-app experiences to users, including streaming games and mini-programs. Developers can now submit a single app with the capability to stream all of the games offered in their catalog. On top of that, the company says the apps in the apps will be able to use Apple's in-app purchase system to offer their users paid digital content or services for the first time. The company has also expanded the analytics available to developers, adding more than 50 new reports. Apple promises developers more info on those in March. The company is also expanding the availability of sign-in with Apple and other privacy-focused login options inside applications. Available now The company says developers that offer third-party or social login services within their app will have the option to offer sign-in with Apple, or they will now be able to offer an equivalent privacy-focused login service instead. So aside from Epic's Sweeney and the guy from JP Morgan, there hasn't been a lot of time for reaction to this yet. We'll probably get into that more on Monday. There's something else I want to talk about today, though. Somebody wrote to me once congratulating me on macOS Ken, saying, "Here's to 7 more years." That was roughly 11 years ago. The idea for macOS Ken was first discussed 18 years and 3 weeks ago at Macworld 2006. It was Marty Garcia, Dan East, Laura Burstein, and me. Marty is the founder and CEO of Future Sonics. He gave me some great business advice, to which I did not listen. I was too excited about the pun. macOS Ken, rhymes with macOS 10, which used to be a thing. Ask your parents. I was also excited to restart this daily thing I had been doing for Scott Shepard on Inside Mac Radio. Scott was not as excited about me doing this on my own. He passed away a few years ago, and I'm sorry we never got back in touch. Acrimonious as things got, you and I would not be here without Scott. Since then, it's mostly been you and me. Talking Apple, cracking wise, and occasionally making magic. I have met people that I never would have met if not for this show. Podcasters, big thinkers, a bona fide celebrity or two. I also have friendships, real friendships born of this. Of me sitting at a microphone 18 years ago today, thinking the whole thing was going to make me sick, and doing it anyway. And you welcomed me. You listened. You wrote in. You supported the sponsors who have advertised here over the years, and you've supported me through various other shows and attempts at making revenue, like through Patreon. Hint, hint. It is a weird time for podcasting, but that's okay. At its core, podcasting is weird. At least it is the way we do it, you and me. This is not NPR. This is not CNN. It's not even local radio. It's like one of my mentors used to say about the radio station where he worked. It's like college radio without the college. Only this is like that without the radio, too. Part of me wants to thank people by name, but I know that I would leave somebody out, and besides, you know who you are. If you've been here all 18 years, thank you. And if you just got here this week, thank you. Everybody, do me a favor. Tell a friend. I would love to meet them, and as far as I know, I'll be here for a bit. macOS Ken, brought to you by me, and supported by people like you, patrons through Patreon. Find out more and add your support at patreon.com/macOSKen. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media, online at backbeatmedia.com. You can reach me a couple of ways. info@macosken.com or call 716-780-4080. Year 19 starts next Monday. Until next time, that is news from macOS Ken. I'm Ken Ray.
Ciao.